Welcome back to another installment of r/no sleep. Title: My friends and I found an abandoned oil rig. Like always, please like and subscribe. Let's get into it. I watched as the helicopter pilot began his preparations to take off, barely a minute after touching down on the helipad. As Mark helped Savannah step down off of the vehicle, the pilot gestured towards his headset, and I fished my radio receiver from my pocket and put my own headset on, barely quieting the still spinning rotors. "You guys good?" "I think we're good here, man. Thanks again." "Don't mention it. Just remember that you've only got exactly 48 hours. If you're not back on the platform and ready by then, I'll have to wait another week to swing back around to get you, and that'll cost extra. Good luck. I'll see you guys then." I thanked him, and as soon as the others finished unloading our prepared bags onto the helipad, we stood and watched as the helicopter took flight and disappeared quickly into the inky blackness of a starless night. I waited a moment longer, looking out into the open ocean below me, my headlight beam faintly glittering against the calm ripples of the sea. "We don't have all night. Let's get indoors before the wind picks up," Julian muttered, breaking the silence. I turned away from the sea and towards the group. Julian had already picked up his duffel bag and had already begun to hastily move towards the stairs descending to the crew quarters. Mark seemed solemn as usual, but even in the dark I could make out the smile creeping through his face as he helped Savannah grab her bags as she kissed him on the cheek. Maria sat silent, eyes locked on the clouds that had swallowed up our transport. As Mark and Savannah descended out of view, I stood next to my sister, putting my hand on her tense shoulder as I noticed her knuckles turn white gripping her backpack. "You all right?" I asked after a moment. She stood motionless, and I felt her shoulders shivering. "Mark said we should be able to get the rig's reserve power on. If we get inside, we'll be able to warm up." She turned her head to me and attempted to mask her frightened face with a sheepish smile. "Yeah, sure. Sorry, it's just different than I expected." "A bit, yeah." I lied. In truth, I'd studied my ass off doing as much work prior to our arrival at the rig. I poured through company records. I'd watched every video I could explaining oil rig architecture, and I'd even researched local oceanic weather patterns this time of the year for this area. She begged to come along, but now, stranded here shaking, it was obvious she hadn't prepared like the rest of us. I gently grabbed her backpack from her shaking hand and made my way towards the staircase. She followed close behind. As we made our way towards the large bolted doors sealing off the crew area, she quietly called over. "Hey Ellie, what's up? Thanks for letting me and Julian tag along." I nodded as if it were no big deal that they'd been permitted to join this expedition. Mark had approached me weeks ago with the opportunity of a lifetime, an oil rig in international waters, decommissioned for almost a decade, unmanned, and slated to be dismantled in the coming months. Even though we were further away from a city than any of us have ever been, this was undoubtedly an urban explorer's wet dream. It had been years since Mark, Savannah, and I had the opportunity to go somewhere new, and with our increasingly busy lives, we figured that this was the perfect last hurrah for our old hobby. The timing worked out perfect, and we each managed to scrape enough money together to find and hire a private helicopter pilot to make the 2 trips required to drop us off and pick us back up. In all fairness, Maria had joined us on some of our trips in years prior. Being a few years younger than us, we opted to let her tag along on our lower stakes outings. But she was an adult now, and had begged to be allowed to come with us for this final trip. It took a substantial amount of convincing for Savannah and Mark to vote yes on bringing her, but it certainly didn't hurt that Maria's new boyfriend, Julian, had actually worked 6 months on an oil rig a few years back. I pushed the heavy iron door open. The hinges groaned against the salt-corroded metal, the sound carrying through the empty corridors. I found the rest of the group already making their way through the narrow hallway, and was relieved to see that the area generally matched what I had already researched. The quarters consisted of 2 floors, the upper of which we were currently passing through to reach the lower-level access stairs at the end of the hall. We passed the expected amenities, including a galley, a laundry room, several changing rooms, and a large dry storage pantry, long empty. The crew living area, consisting of a common room and several shared bedrooms, waited for us 1 level below. As we descended the stairs, we each found a bedroom and began to unload our things. For the next 2 nights, these quiet, windowless white rooms would be our home. I unpacked my bedroll and went to sit on the bunk bed when I heard Mark call out to gather us in the hall. As I stood in the doorway, he smiled and looked around at each of us before speaking. All right, so we made it. Place seems to be in much better condition than we expected too, which is a good sign. I think before we start settling in for the night though, we should review our plan. A couple of us let out an overly dramatic sigh, and I looked over to see Savannah chuckling as she rolled her eyes. Even though a plan was necessary in a situation like this, we all knew that Mark would plan his own funeral if he could. Yeah, get it out of your system, Mark smirked. We'll have a busy day of fooling around out here tomorrow. But there are still precautions and things we need to take care of first. Julian, you'll come with me up to the control deck here in a minute to see if we can actually get the auxiliary generators running. That'll get us some light and heat in here. Elijah, you stay here with Maria and Sav. Julian, you ready? Sure, just give me a minute to get my stuff. I looked across the hall to see Julian smiling for the first time all day. He was hard to read at times, but I could tell the familiarity of a place like this was slowly starting to bring him to life. As Mark dismissed us from our meeting, I smiled and gestured a sloppy salute. I watched Julian pop back into the room he'd chosen and shut the door behind him for a few moments. A minute later, he emerged, pulling a pair of bolt cutters and utility gloves from his duffel bag. Maria had already changed into more comfortable clothes, ran her fingers through his curly hair, and hugged him before he and Mark left. For the first time since we boarded the helicopter earlier that evening, I had a few minutes to unwind. It was still too cold inside to take off my jacket just yet, but I kicked off my boots and laid down on the carpeted floor. Unlike anything we'd ever explored before, this place was actually fairly well kept. The carpet, although old and shaggy, was free of debris and still felt soft to the touch. My headlamp illuminated a pristine white ceiling, lower than what I expected. As Maria tried to keep idle conversation with Savannah, I just smiled and shut my eyes for a minute, enjoying the satisfaction of having pulled off the coolest B&E ever. It must have been about 10 minutes later when a low vibrating grumble shook the floor beneath us for just a minute, before settling into a droning hum barely perceptible but distinct from the ocean waves. I felt a shot of icy ocean air begin to flow through the vent above my head, before softening and becoming warm and cozy comfort. I stood up and quickly located a light switch at the end of the hallway. Flicking it bathed us in bright, artificial white light. The girls stood up and we began to take in our surroundings in full when the door at the far end of the commons room swung open, Mark and Julian returning to join us in the warmth. Maria ran up to Julian and practically tackling him as she showered praises on him with the giddiness of a schoolgirl. Mark sauntered across the newly aglow interior, taking in its artifice and cramped nature before plopping down next to Savannah, resting his head on her shoulder. He looked more tired than usual, and I recognized his brow furrow. How was it out there? Do you guys find the control deck okay? I prodded after a moment. Yeah, it was fine. Julian had it right on the money. Dude knew exactly where to take us, right over the moon pole at the very top. He sounded almost apathetic as he told me, his eyes gazing off into nowhere as Savannah scratched his back. Everything okay, man? You seem a little out of it. Something happened out there? Mark stared blankly for a few seconds until his eyes focused on me and seemed to process what I said. Oh, yeah, no, nothing happened. Don't worry. It's just like, you know, when you're hit with a really bad deja vu, and instead of it only lasting a second, it lasts for like a minute or two. Savannah stopped scratching his back and wrapped her arm around his shoulders, pulling him closer. Yeah, she chimed in. I get that sometimes. It's probably going to happen at least once or twice when we're here. Been a while since we got in somewhere that wasn't rinsed already. It'll feel just like college. Yeah, I guess so. Mark seemed distant still. Julian and Maria came and sat down in the hall with us, smiling and holding hands. After a few seconds, Mark's eyes suddenly lit up. You guys won't believe how sick tomorrow's gonna be. Even what I could just see with my headlamp looked incredible. Up top in the control room, there's a shit ton of old broadcasting equipment, and you'll never guess what Julian found under the control desk. He paused, either for dramatic effect or because he really wanted us to guess. After a moment of our non-compliance, he rolled his eyes and reached into his jacket's interior pocket, pulling out a key ring, what I could only assume was every key and access tag we needed to find our way around the facility. Holy shit, it was just under the desk? Yeah, he said on his old rig. The manager dude, Hey Joel, what did they say he was called? The toll pusher, Julian said, wrapping his arm around Maria as he pulled at the carpet. Yeah, the toll pusher. Anyways, The toll pusher would always keep a master key set in his office. Only the people in the office could get in, so it was never a problem. Thankfully, we brought a key of our own. He gestured towards the bolt cutters that Julian had set down in the hall. We laughed for a moment, and then a few more. It was good to all be here and have successfully pulled this off. We'd never cracked anything like this before, and I won't lie, I think that we were just a little giddy that we'd done it. After a bit, Maria caught me beginning to yawn and followed suit. Sov checked the time, and we were surprised to see that we'd already had spent an hour on board, and midnight was rapidly approaching. Mark made some dumb remark about time flying when you're having fun, and told us to plan to wake up at 7 so that we could start exploring the upper levels. Julian and Maria slipped into the room as Savannah helped pull Mark up, and the two of them wished me good night before retreating to their bunk. I closed my door behind me, and thought to myself that this was a pretty awesome last hurrah before turning in for the night. I woke up the next morning to the sound of Mark knocking on my door. "Hey Ellie, wake up man, it's nearly 7:30. We managed to get the water and stove running in the galley. Oatmeal and bacon for breakfast if you're hungry." I rolled over and checked my phone. I hadn't bothered to set an alarm, but I figured I wouldn't have slept so well as to sleep in. I groggily rolled out of bed and got dressed for the day before joining the others in the galley. Maria greeting me with a smile. "Morning, idiot. Couldn't sleep?" "No, I slept too well. Usually I can't sleep on boats. The rocking bothers me too much." Savannah put down her instant coffee and rolled her eyes at me. "Well, we're not on a boat, Ellie. There's not going to be any rocking. This thing's bolted to the sea floor." Julian put up his hand, taking a second to chew and swallow before interjecting. "No, that's just shallow rigs. Deep water rigs like this are tensioned to the ocean floor with cables, so they're pretty sturdy, but they do float and rock a bit." "So why didn't we feel any rocking last night?" Julian shrugged. "The sea must have been pretty calm all night, I guess." Mark scoffed. "No way, dude. You felt how windy it was when we went out there. This thing would have been rocking like crazy if it wasn't bolted all the way down." Julian sat, brow furrowed, for a second before shrugging and returning to his food. We all finished up our breakfast and Savannah returned to the room to grab her camera while we prepared to leave the quarters. As we stepped out into the salty morning air, the daylight washed the rig in a radiant glow. It was incredible how different it looked in the daytime, the yellow structure towering past the narrow catwalk leading away from the living area. I looked down beneath the grated floor beneath me and noted that the waves seemed much more intense this morning than they had last night, crashing against the gargantuan structure sinking beneath their depths. I still didn't feel any rocking. As much as Mark typically acted the de facto leader of sorts, there was a silent understanding that at least for today, we followed Julian. He knew the ins and outs of a place like this, and we'd be way less likely to get lost if we stayed close. He led us around the catwalk towards the stairs that would take us to the upper levels. Savannah stopped us what seemed like every 20 feet to get another picture of the rig, and as much as I wanted to be annoyed, I couldn't blame her. We've entered dozens of brutalist structures before, but the rig took the cake for the most striking. Outside the crew quarters, every fastener served a purpose, nothing wasted on form over function. Platforms hung suspended in the air above our heads, utility sections that would normally be hidden from view intertwined, encompassing the limited areas designated for human use. As she stopped to take a photo of one of the platforms ahead of us, Savannah froze in place before lowering her camera and gesturing for us to hold still. "Guys, do you see that?" We looked to where she indicated, and sure as day, there was a security camera aimed right at us. My head immediately began to swivel around wildly, searching for any other cameras we may have missed. As Savannah, Maria, and I slowly started panicking, Mark began to laugh at us. "I noticed those last night too," Mark said with a shit-eating grin. "I flipped out too. Julian was kind enough to wait 5 minutes before explaining that they're not broadcasting anywhere off-site. They're wired in directly to the on-site systems." Julian leaned smugly against the rails. "You could have at least let them freak out about it a few more seconds, man. That would have been hilarious." Savannah rolled her eyes and playfully punched Mark in the shoulder as she passed him on the stair. By the time we finished exploring the middle deck, it was nearly 9. We paused for a while to look out into the open sea. After a while, Maria coughed, an attempt to snag our attention. "So, I don't want to sidetrack anything we're doing, but are we going to check out the signal or what?" What signal? I asked. Savannah and Mark looked equally confused. Julian's face scoured, and I caught him nudging her arm as if she brought up something sensitive. She shot him an incredulous look before continuing. It's just, well, before we went to bed last night, Jewel was telling me that. I said it was probably nothing. Drop it, Julian nearly snapped at her. I stood straight up from the railing I'd been leaning against, attempting to place myself closer between the two. No, go on, Maria. What was he telling you? She looked nervous, like a puppy backed into a corner. Well, it's just that he said that there was a signal that was being broadcast to the radio from the control room. He saw on the Asili something showing a reading, but the audio must have been turned off. I was under the impression he must have told you. Mark arose from his resting place as well, also moving towards Julian. His laid-back visage was quickly shed, replaced with a burdening red anger. And you didn't bring this up, why? If someone knows we're here, we could be seriously screwed, and you and your girlfriend included. That must have been, what, 10 hours ago? Julian backed away from the two of us as Savannah put her hand on Mark's shoulder. Babe, he probably just didn't think about that. It's fine. We'll go check it out. And if not, if we end up in prison because we agreed to let Maria and this jack-off tag along? I turned to Mark. Whoa, man, Maria's the one that just let us know. Leave her out of this. Julian, caught in the middle between Mark and I, stepped back and towards Maria. Whoa, guys, calm down. I didn't mean anything by it. I saw the oscilloscope, I saw that it looked like it had been running a while, and I saw that the audio wasn't turned on. The signals come and go from these places all the time, regardless if anyone's here. I didn't bring it up because I thought it would be fun to show you guys today. That's all, swear. Mark pointed a large angry finger into Julian's chest. You're gonna take us up there right now and show us that signal. And if there's even one hint of trouble for us, you can bet your ass the cops or the Coast Guard or whoever pulls up will know just who it was that broke us in here. Julian led his way back up to the control room at the top of the rig. It was several levels higher than where we'd been prior, and reminded me of a fire watchtower overlooking the whole of the structure. Mark pulled the ring of his keys from his pocket, but Julian reminded him of last night's handiwork. He pushed the door open easily. The handle had already been destroyed by the bolt cutters. As we collectively entered the control room, it was immediately clear that this was the most advanced facility we'd seen yet. On the wall to our left, broadcasting equipment covered the entire half of the room, wires running in and out of plugs, long deactivated monitors dispersed throughout the tangled mass of cords. The wall immediately across from us consisted only of a large window, splashed and stained with dried sea salt. Outside, the window overlooked a crane that jutted out from the platform, its cable dangling far down into the murky water of the moon pool below us, concealing what lay at the end. On the wall to our right, a small metal desk lay covered in documents, while a massive control panel to its side glittered with shimmering indicators and buttons. Julian made his way over to the broadcasting station and indicated to the small green display. Sure enough, a sound wave bounced along the screen, a signal of some sort making its way to the device while no output could be heard. Well, find a way to turn the sound on, Mark implored. I could hear the thinly veiled curiosity poorly hidden behind his guise of anger. Julian searched for a moment before seemingly finding the correct knob. He turned it, and as he did, the audio signal began to play through the speakers. The sound of rushing water could clearly be heard, the slosh echoing and distorted. See? Told you it was no big deal. Just some microphone attached to the structure down at the surface. As soon as the words left Julian's mouth, a voice began to cry through the signal. It was grainy and distorted, as though the microphone recording it was too close, too old. Oh God, it worked. You're there. Please, you have to hurry. I need help. We sat frozen where we stood for several seconds, not knowing what to say. Maria cautiously approached the console, finding the closest thing that looked like a microphone, and began to speak to it. Hello? Who is this? Why do you need help? The voice cracked to life once more, this time louder and more difficult to make out. Yes, I need help. Underneath the... I can't hear you. The signal is too distorted. Slow down. Where are you? Underneath the rig. The sub-facility. You'll need to take the ladder. It's in the moon pool. Please. The chamber I'm stuck in is slowly filling up with water. I have hours left at most. You need to come and activate the pumps. They're down here, but I'm locked out. Please hurry. We all looked at each other for a moment. Was this some sort of joke? What sub-facility? Savannah grabbed the microphone from Maria. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Did you say you were nearby the oil rig? Are you in a submarine or something? No, I told you, I'm under the rig. The rig is a farce. The real facility is under the water. You can get here via the lander. I think it's the blue button, right next to the desk behind you. Please hurry. The audio cut off suddenly. We sat there in silence for about 2 minutes before I spoke up. We should try to help, shouldn't we? Mark looked at me like I was insane. Help? Help who? The mystery man who claims to be under the water? In a facility under an oil rig that no one's visited in a decade? Be serious, Elijah. This is clearly some sort of hoax. Savannah leaned against the desk, putting her head in her hands. I don't know, Mark. Whoever that was sounded pretty scared. Maybe this is legit. I looked across the room. Sure enough, on the panel next to the desk, a square blue button sat out amongst the rest. Underneath it, in black lettering, read the words, Submersible Lander. From my research, a type of underwater elevator. As Mark and Savannah argued about the legitimacy of the signal, I walked over to the panel. Maria stood next to me, and as I saw the fear in her eyes, I knew that she believed the mysterious voice just as much as I had. I pressed the button. A klaxon alarm sounded throughout the whole rig, interrupting the argument behind me. Julian, who had stepped over to the window, called out, Hey, everyone might want to look at this. My rig definitely didn't have one of these. As we made our way to the window, we watched as the crane rapidly reeled up its seemingly infinite supply of cable. Suddenly, from below, we heard an enormous splashing sound, followed by a thud and a click that echoed through the rest of the structure. We quickly descended the stairs, exiting the control room, and Julian rushed ahead of us, beckoning for us to follow him to the lowest platform. As I made my way down the last flight of stairs, my breath was taken away as the lander came into view. Its rusted exterior was encrusted with sea moss and barnacles. It was mounted to the pillars that descended into the moon pool below, seemingly functioning as an elevator shaft for the hidden transport. The cable that ran from the top of the crane up above was taut and tangled with all manner of sea plants. Printed in bold white letters, practically rusted over and peeling, but still legible, were the words, W&H Submersible Facility, levels 0 through 01. As we stood there awestruck, Savannah noticed a large red button on the pedestal next to the lander on the platform in front of us. Almost as by instinct, she reached out and pressed it, and the doors of the lander slid open before us. Remarkably, it was entirely dry on the inside, with no hints of leakage anywhere to be seen. There were 3 rows of 5 seats each, arranged facing inwards towards the center of the lander. It was embarrassingly long before anyone had the courage to speak. Whatever was down there, whoever was down there, was seemingly real. This was an entire portion of the facility we weren't prepared for. Maybe even the majority of the facility. But someone needed our help, right? I swallowed hard and asked my friends, So, are we getting in? As the doors to the lander sealed behind us, I sat down nervously on the pristine metal seat directly across the interior. The bulky box was robust, and although serviceable, its design far favored utility over comfort. We sat in the dark for only a brief second, and the overhead lights buzzed on. As they did, I turned to look over at Maria, who sat between Julian and I. Fearful tears ran down her face as she trembled. It hadn't taken much deliberation for us to decide we all should go down. The lander was clearly watertight, and if we got down to the bottom and decided that we weren't in a position to go on further, control panel mounted on the door guaranteed we had the option to return to the surface at any time. Mark had suggested that maybe only a couple of us descended into the depths, but Savannah had pointed out that splitting up in an unknown situation like this was a far worse idea. It's not like we had long to deliberate anyhow. The voice on the broadcast had told us we didn't have any time to lose. A rumble. I felt the taut cord holding us slack up for a moment, dropping us maybe a few centimeters before I felt us beginning to slowly lower. Maria let out a whimper, gripping Julian's arm as though she had never intended to let go. Mark only winced, while Savannah seemed to almost be enjoying herself. After a few seconds, the cold rattle surrounding us stopped, and I felt the metal wall I'd rest my back against slowly turn cold to the touch. We had descended below the surface. Not one spoke a word for the duration of the descent. The gravity of our situation wasn't lost on any of us. We had illegally trespassed on what was evidently some sort of hidden facility. If we had opted to ignore the voice, to choose not to try to help, then we either willingly let someone die to protect ourselves, or risked him surviving just to rat us out for being here, or worse. For the sake of our own skins and consciences, we had to do this, right? After several minutes, another jolt, and the submersible shuddered, groaning as it found a resting place. I felt the floor beneath me shift as the external locks docked our pod to some unseen structure below. Suddenly, a voice rang from the small PA speaker mounted in the corner of the room. It was grainy and warped, as before, but the words could still be made out. All right, perfect. I knew you guys would come. Your capsule's connected to the facility systems now, so I can wire in and guide you to me without having to depend on the radio transmitter. Here in a few minutes, the docking portal will finish its sealing process, and the portal will open into the middle of the floor in front of you. Careful, the ladder down will be slippery. Mark stood up out of his seat. Who are you? We're coming down to help if we can, but we need to know what we're getting into. What is this place? There was about 30 seconds of silence from the system before the voice hummed to life once more. I should mention, there's no microphones on your guys' end, so I can't hear a word you're saying. There'll be cameras throughout the facility so I can make sure you're heading in the right direction. I'm going to make a guess, however, and say you're probably wondering who I am. I'll be honest, I don't have a satisfying answer for you yet, but I promise to explain everything I can when you get here. Good luck. Julian stood up suddenly. Nope, no way we're going any further with this weird shit. I didn't sign up for this. None of us did. I don't trust whoever the hell is talking to us, and neither should any of you. He moved to press the button that would return us to the surface, but before he could, an aperture opened in the middle of the room, trickling water slowly into the hatch with a ladder. Julian rolled his eyes and pressed the button anyways. A buzzer beeped, and an automated voice rang out from the PA above. Warning, unable to return to surface at this time. Please detach from dock at sublevel 01. Surfacing will commence after depressurization process completes. Estimated time to depressurization, 28 hours. Savannah stood up out of her chair. Wait, 28 hours? It took us 5 minutes to get down here. What do you mean 28 hours? I winced. It's the pressure, I muttered. The deeper we go, the more time our bodies need to adjust before coming back up. I should have thought of this before. So what, we just wait? Savannah snapped. If we go up too fast, I swallowed, our blood starts to boil. Mark turned to me. That's a pretty big deal to just forget, man. If it's going to take a whole day and change just to come back up, that only leaves us with 10 hours to get to this guy, come back before the pilot swings back around. We definitely don't have enough food and water to last the extra week before his next try around. Maria stood up out of her seat and quickly walked over to the ladder to begin her descent. We all sat looking at her for a moment before she spoke. Well, if we only have 10 hours, we'd better hurry. Come on. We each made the descent into the chamber at the bottom of the ladder. I was the last one down, and as I reached the floor below our feet, I examined our surroundings. We seemed to be at the end of a circular hallway. At the end, a set of stairs descended about 5 feet where the platform sat, and the bulkhead door waited for us. Mark, Savannah, and Maria had already begun to walk down the hall. As Julian turned to follow them, I grabbed his shoulder with my hand. Hey Jewel, we need to talk real quick. Now? We don't exactly have a lot of time, make it quick. I let his shoulder go and he turned to face me, his expression full of annoyance. Look, I don't think any of us want to be down here. This was supposed to be a fun trip, and now we're actually in some real potential danger. Yeah, no shit, dude. I didn't know any of this was here. I'm in the same boat as you. I thought this was a normal rig like the one I was on. I know you do. That's why we brought you here, remember? You were only allowed to come because you were useful, because you were able to pull your weight. But we're not in your territory anymore. So you have a different job now? Oh yeah? What's that? Asshole? As long as we're down here, keeping Maria safe is your only priority. If shit hits the fan and I'm not able to protect her, I need you to swear with your life that you'll put her first. He softened. The anger on his face slowly washed away. Yeah, man, of course. Same goes to you though. Of course. I'm glad we have an understanding. We quickly caught up to the rest of the group, who had made their way down the stairs and had opened the bulkhead door separating us from the rest of the facility. As we passed through, the overhead lights buzzed softly, casting long, flickering shadows. The air smelled old, damp, metallic. Somewhere deeper in the structure, I could hear the low hum of machinery, the steady churn of something big operating beneath our feet. We stood at the bottom of the access stairs, just past the bulkhead door. The passage ahead waited eagerly for us. Mark turned in a slow circle, his flashlight sweeping over the walls. Okay, there's no way that generator up top is running all this. Julian frowned, listening. Yeah, no chance. Maria glanced between them. Wait, what do you mean? Julian exhaled, shifting his pack. I mean, what we got running last night should have been barely enough for emergency light and heat. That thing's been sitting for years. Mark crossed his arms. We figured it was a long shot that even if we got it on, we weren't sure how long it'd last. Offshore rigs usually run on diesel, which doesn't go bad the same way gas does, so we hoped there was a chance the reserves would last long enough for our trip. Thought we got lucky. He gestured vaguely at the hall ahead. This is way beyond that. Maria blinked. But then where's the power coming from? Savannah raised an eyebrow. I'm going to go out on a limb and say something down here. Julian exhaled through his nose, looking down the corridor. Has to be something bigger. Another power source. Something bigger. That phrase sat heavy in the air. Maria hesitated, then took a small step closer to me. So, is it bad? Nobody answered. Savannah grinned, sharp. Only one way to find out. She turned and kept walking. The rest of us hesitated, then followed. We walked for maybe 100 feet or so before a fork appeared in our path. The passageway opened into a larger chamber where 3 hallways split off in different directions. A rusted sign bolted to the wall labeled them. Sub-level maintenance, left. Primary research wing, right. Habitation and offices, straight. Where to, mystery man? Julian muttered, looking around for a speaker or intercom. As if in response, an intercom in the corner of the room sputtered to life. The words were harder to make out than before, distorted and echoing. Whatever he was saying, it sounded intense, as though his message was urgent. Savannah tilted her head. Do any of you understand what he's saying? I can't make it out. The garbled speech cut out intermittently, and we stood puzzled, waiting for clarity on our direction. Amidst the static and nonsense, my ear caught just one word. Right. You guys heard that too? Sounded like he said go right. Mark furrowed his brow and peered down the corridor leading to our right. Primary research, huh? Wonder if the poor bastard got stuck monitoring data. Maria lit up suddenly and pointed towards the floor leading to the research wing. Look, guys, footprints. Savannah pulled a flashlight out of her bag and illuminated the ground ahead. Indeed, tracks of briny water were faintly visible on the floor. They were difficult to make out in the dim light, but it appeared that whoever left them had been rushed, as several amorphous tracks weaved in and out of each other. As we traced the trail of the water out of the hall, the path curved around, ending abruptly against the wall next to the hallway entrance. Shit, looks like maybe he's been here recently. Julian shone his own flashlight, peering down each of the hallways. I sighed. All of his tracks seemed to be coming or going from research. Plus, he said, right? Yeah, I think so. So right we go. The research wing stretched out ahead, a dim, branching corridor lined with rusted pipes and corroded archways. The lights flickered more erratically than before, casting our warped shadows across the walls. The air was damp and stale, and something faint reeked the further we went in. We followed the water trail cautiously, our footsteps echoing against the steel floor. Somewhere behind the walls, machinery groaned and hummed, a constant torrent of noise that assaulted my ears and tightened our pace. "Anyone else feel like we're walking into a damn haunted house?" Julian muttered. "Yeah," Mark said, "except you're not actually in danger inside a haunted house." Savannah snorted. "Tell that to the idiot in the clown mask who accidentally punched me last year." Maria said nothing, her eyes darting nervously between the bolted doors we passed. The research wing had the feel of something abandoned hastily. In the few open doors, we could see the chairs knocked over, papers scattered on the floor, monitors flickering, and displaying readouts I couldn't even begin to understand. A burst of static crackled through a nearby intercom, making all of us jump. The voice was still completely unintelligible, static, and the growing sound of rushing water still drowning out meaningful speech. But the emotion behind it was far stronger, more desperate than before. Panic. Do not. As it cut once more, we all exchanged glances. "What is he trying to say?" Maria whispered. "No clue. Is he hurt?" Mark asked. Savannah shook her head. "I don't know. He sounds frantic, scared." I swallowed, my throat dry. "He said something about right before, but now he's saying, 'Do not,'" Julian finished. His voice was tight. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. The air felt heavier now, pressing in on my skin, making it harder to breathe. Mark pointed ahead. "Looks like the water tracks continue up ahead, into that big door. Let's at least check it out before we decide to turn back." I wasn't sure we even had the option to turn back at this point, so onwards we went. It took 3 of us to open the massive door at the end of the hallway. As we breached its threshold, we found ourselves in an enormous, cavernous room. It looked like a central hub for a research wing, a vast circular chamber with multiple exits leading off into different directions. The ceiling stretched at least 50 feet above us, lined with hanging cables and pipes. The walls were filled with observation decks, consoles, and what looked like vats filled with an inky blue ichor. The entire room had a sickly rotten smell to it. The odor caused me to cover my nose upon entry. Condensation dripped from the ceiling, and the entirety of the floor was slippery with water. By far, though, the most striking feature was the pit in the center of the room. Taking up almost the entirety of the floor, a gaping maw descended impossibly deep, only muted darkness visible further down. Its sides weren't plated steel, but solid, jagged rock. It dawned on me that this level of the facility must be mounted to the ocean floor. This cavernous hole bored directly into the seabed. The pit was surrounded entirely by robust guardrails, and snaking coils and wires rose from the darkness below, feeding into sensors and monitors all around the central rotunda. Hundreds of clearly pulsating tubes appeared to be siphoning the same blue liquid from the depths, slowly filling the vats in the room with the stuff. Mark whistled. "Jesus." Maria inched closer to the pit's edge, peering down. "How deep you think it goes?" Julian shook his head. "No idea, but I don't like that we can't see the bottom. Whatever's down there absolutely stinks, though." I moved toward the railing, gripping the cold metal and squinting into the void. There was something about the way the cables draped into the abyss, like fishing lines waiting to pull something up. I stood staring into the void, and out of the corner of my eye I saw Maria, Julian, and Mark step away. "We'll check this side of the room," Mark called. "See if there's anything useful in those offices." It made me nervous to split up, but they were only on the other side of the pit. "Guess that leaves us," Savannah said, nudging my arm. "Come on." I hesitated, my gaze lingering on the pit. A part of me wanted to walk away from it, to ignore the gnawing sense of unease clawing at my chest. As I let go of the rail and turned to follow Savannah, something caught my eye. A movement in the depths. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The darkness down there was thick, suffocating, shifting slightly like fog over still water. But as I stared, I realized there was something in it. Something moving. Something rising. A shape, massive and sinuous, uncoiled from the depths like a snake. My breath caught in my throat as it breached the surface. A colossal, inky black limb studded with glistening malformed sores and riddled with thick, pulsating tubes sucking the blue substance from its mottled veins. A tentacle, writhing and frantic, and it was reaching for Maria. I opened my mouth to scream, but the noise barely escaped my throat. My body locked in place, frozen in horror as the thing lashed forward. She barely had time to react. As she started to turn, eyes wide, mouth parting, then the tentacle struck. It coiled around her torso, squeezing tight with an awful wet crunch before yanking her off her feet. The air escaped her body, warped her final scream, twisting into a lifeless groan. The sound echoed, sharp and raw, as she was dragged beneath the pit's edge. Julian lunged forward, grabbing her outstretched arm, but the force was too strong. His fingers slipped, and she was pulled into the abyss. There was only silence, and she was gone. I stumbled back, heart hammering. My pulse roared in my ears, drowning out the horrified shouts of the others. Savannah gripped my arm in a vice-like hold. Then, as suddenly as the tentacle had appeared, a blue flash filled the room, arising from the pit below. The whole chamber was flooded with it, a pulsing glow that lasted less than a second. It wasn't light, not exactly, more like a ripple in the air, a distortion that moved through the room. The air shimmered, thickening like a pressure wave before vanishing. The flash was the least of my focus, however, and I began to run, tears uncontrollably streaming down my face as I struggled to make haste towards where Julian and Mark were. "You promised me you'd protect her. I'll kill you. I swear I'll kill you." I approached the other side of the pit, stopping to wipe my eyes between sobs. As I looked towards the two of them with clarity in my vision, they stood, gawking at me as though I was crazy. Between them, Maria was back, standing exactly where she had been a moment before. "Dude, what the hell are you talking about? Calm down." I stumbled forward, gasping for air, my mind reeling. I had just seen her die. I had seen her dragged into the depths. I had heard the breath squeezed out of her lungs, but here she was, alive. "Ellie?" Maria frowned at me. "What's wrong?" I stared at her, chest heaving. You were..." A deep, hollow sound rumbled from the pit, and I saw Julian's eyes widen. I whipped around just in time to see the tentacle rise again, exactly as before, but this time all of our eyes were locked onto it. Exactly as before, the limb writhed with malice before curling its slimy end and extending towards my sister. Before it could reach her, though, Julian braced himself, shoving her out of its path. As she fell to the side, the appendage recalculated, grabbing Julian instead. His strangled cry tore through the room as the thing yanked him off the ground, squeezing his chest with enough force I heard his ribs crunch under the pressure. His eyes bulged, locked onto mine as the tentacle ripped him away, disappearing like lightning into the dark. In the panic, I realized that Mark and Savannah had already taken off, attempting to run to the door and slipping in their step on the wetted floor. I stooped down, reaching to pick up Maria, who was dazed on the ground. She was soaked in the salty, slime-tinged water covering the floor. As I got her to her feet, the others had made it to the door and were holding it open, screaming for us to hurry up and make it through. Through Maria's wails, I managed to put her arm over my shoulder and helped her stumble towards the door. Mark and Savannah had crossed back into the hallway, and I shoved Maria through the doorway before I went through. As I rushed to close the door behind me, another blue flash shot through the room. I turned, just in time to see Julian standing in the exact spot as he had before, now alone. His expression one of sheer terror as the tentacle reached for him again. The door slammed shut between us, and the last thing I heard was his scream cut off with a blood-curdling snap. Mark held Savannah in his arms as she trembled, and Maria sat collapsed, inconsolable heap on the floor. We didn't have time to wait, though. We could stop when we made it to safety. I pulled her up, and we began to run back through the hallway from which we'd came. It only took a few minutes before we reached the junction from earlier, and we let ourselves stop. Savannah hyperventilated as Mark ran his fingers through her hair, his eyes wide as he stared blankly into the research hall. Maria sat against the wall, choking with every breath as tears streamed between sobs. The intercom crackled to life, the words finally audible again. "No, no, 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 no! I told you not to go right! I told you not to go that way! I drowned out the incessant noise from the speaker and collapsed with my back against the wall. I stared blankly at the trail of water which had led us to the research wing, the trail that curled towards the wall and ended in the spot where my sister now sat crying. Precious time was slipping away, but none of us found the will to stand. Maria sat, still weeping for Julian. Mark's eyes never wavered from the cold corridor from which we'd narrowly escaped advanced research. Savannah paced wildly, her breath frantic. I couldn't tell if the muttering under her breath was fueled by anger or fear. The voice over the intercom had died out. Whoever was on the other end must have seen from the camera in the junction that we had all ignored its panicked rambling since we arrived back at the intersection. Savannah paused her pacing, eyes locked onto the steady drip that intermediately dropped from the ceiling above. Would someone please put a towel or a shirt or something on the floor? It's too loud in here. I need to think. I rolled my eyes and pulled a rolled t-shirt from under my bag, throwing it onto the floor where the drips were landing. She wasn't wrong though. In the silence left in the absence of conversation, the steady drip was deafening. It screamed into our ears, blasting the truth we'd been ignoring loud and clear. You're underwater. You are not safe here. Maria wiped her eyes and stood up suddenly. I know you saw that too, Ellie. He was alive back there. He was back on the ledge. I'm going to get him. I sat back against the cold metal. He was back, but so are you. We're not going only for one of us to die again. Mark tilted his head, his eyes finally leaving the hallway to look at me. What do you two mean he's back? And what do you mean she's back too? Exasperated, I let my head sink back, hitting the iron behind me. Well, she got taken first, dumbass. When the thing came back and grabbed her first, took her down, something reset and she was back between you two. It reached up and grabbed Julian instead that time. When we were closing the door, it happens again, and Julian was on the platform alone. Mark gawked at me like I had two heads. What are you talking about, dude? Nothing ever came and grabbed Maria. It just got Jewel. Savannah's face scrunched. Mark, there's no way you didn't see it. She was right in front of you when she got taken. You and Julian tried grabbing her. By the time we ran over to you, she was back again. Mark and Maria exchanged a dumbstruck glance, and Maria stood up. That didn't happen. I just remember you running up to Joel screaming that you'd kill him, and he pushed me out of the way before it took him. Her eyes focused, fear immediately washing her face. Wait, you're saying that like Julian came back, that happened to me too? Yeah, you don't remember? At all? Maria stood silent for a moment, her eyes on the floor and mouth moving but too shocked to speak. Savannah sighed, exasperated. So what now? Ellie's right, there's no way I'm going back to research, but we still have... She checked her watch. 7 hours until it's too late to return to the surface in time. Mark's eyes locked onto her. You want us to stay down here? Are you kidding me? Hell no. We don't know what else is waiting down here for us. Your watch is busted. By the way, we only have 5 hours left. Are we even going to acknowledge the tree-sized tentacle that just crushed Maria's boyfriend to death? That thing down there, it shouldn't exist. We need to get out of here, now. And just leave whoever is stuck down here alone to die? The voice sounded scared. Mark, we came down here to help, so we need to help. And risk upending like Julian? Maria turned to Mark, fury in her teary eyes. You coward! You let him come down here and die for nothing? If whoever it is stuck down here knows how this place works, he'd be able to reset the loop again and bring him back. We need to keep going. We have to. Mark put his head in his hands. And if you're wrong, if the guy on the intercom decides he doesn't want to play nice, then we tried. We sat in silence for a while longer. Savannah resumed her pacing as Maria began to gather herself and prepare to continue. Mark sat, fuming in the corner. After a while, the speaker buzzed to life once again.
Please hurry. I'm so sorry about your friend. I tried to warn you as best I could. I tried warning you. My equipment, I'm running out of time. The water is up to my waist in here. I won't be able to use the intercom much longer. Stick together this time. All of you.
Mark was on his feet faster than I thought he could move. He stood in front of the speaker and screamed at it. "Who the fuck are you? One of us just died because of you, and we don't even know if you were worth it. I need answers now!" Savannah gently walked up behind him, placing her hand on his back. "He can't hear us, babe." Mark pushed her away and stormed up to the small camera on the other wall. He raised his hand to it, his middle finger raised in a message that the voice was sure to receive. The intercom buzzed to life again.
I know. I'm trying here. I promise. But unless you come get me, Julian will be gone forever."
Maria bolted to her feet. How did he know Julian's name? She ran over to the camera, shoving Mark out of the way. She screamed the words as loud as possible, moving her mouth in an attempt for the voice to read her lips. "How did you know his name?" The speaker lay silent for several long seconds before the speaker sighed.
"Sub-level maintenance. Maria, I'm in sub-level maintenance. Please save me. Then we'll talk."
Maria didn't hesitate for a second and darted off, flashlight in hand, on the path towards our left. Savannah, already standing, took off after her, and it took me a second to stand as I began to chase her too. Mark stopped me, grabbed me by the arm as I moved to enter the dim maintenance hall. "We don't have time for this. We have less than 5 hours until it's too late to return to the surface." "Let me go, Mark. I have to go get my sister, and we have 7 hours, not 5. Mark loosened his grip on my arm. "Not by my watch. Go get them, and be back here in less than 15 minutes. There's nothing good waiting down that hall, I promise you. I'll be here waiting, but I'll be damned if I let anything back through that isn't you three." He released me, and I followed Savannah and Maria into the dark. I winced as I heard the bulkhead door separating the hall from the junction swing close behind me. I turned to see Mark look at me through the small window in the door. He pulled up his wrist and mouthed, 15 minutes. Maintenance was structured very similarly to the research wing. One long central hall seemed to be the through line from which many branching rooms and halls spread. It didn't take long at all for me to catch up to Savannah, who herself had caught up with and stopped Maria, who was begging to continue towards the voice. "No, please, you don't understand. We can help Julian. Whatever's going on here, he can help us. He can help. I need to get him. Please let me go." I paused to look around. On a wall nearby, a camera sat pointed at us, a speaker directly adjacent. I walked over to the camera and gestured with my hands, spreading them apart and shrugging my shoulders as I mouthed the words, "How far?" The intercom buzzed to life.
"Not very. If you hurry, there's a door marked Primary Pump Delta. A bit further. I'm down here, about 2 levels down."
I walked back over to the girls. "Hear that? He's close. Mark wants us back in the junction in 10 minutes though, and I think it'll take a little longer than that. Savannah, can you go back to him and let him know we need a little more time, but we'll be there soon?" She nodded and began to turn back before pulling Maria in for a hug. "We'll try to bring him back, girl. We'll try." My sister nodded, then took off. Before Savannah had even started walking away, Maria was sprinting down the dimly lit hall toward the stairwell labeled Primary Pump Delta. I cursed under my breath, taking off after her. The walls down here were even worse than the ones in research. Creaking metal encased us, rust creeping like veins along the welded seams. The flickering lights overhead barely made a difference against the thick darkness, and the distant grumble of machinery filled the air like a heaving breath. "Maria, slow the hell down," I hissed, to no avail. The intercom crackled again as we ran.
"Almost there. End of the hall. Door on the right. But the good news is there should be service microphones up ahead. Let me know when you find the door marked Triple Bypass." We reached the bottom of the stairs in less than a minute. The words Primary Pump Delta Sublevel 02
were emblazoned on the heavy steel bulkhead in flaking white paint. Below, a bright red logo was stamped on the floor, a familiar WHG. My stomach nodded. What did the pharmaceutical company like Whitlam Hawthorne Group have to do with any of this? Maria didn't hesitate. She grasped a large manual valve on the door and twisted with as much force as she could muster. It groaned, scraping against rusted metal before giving way with a mechanical hiss. The door opened and a cold, damp air rushed to meet us. The room ahead was tighter than the corridors behind, filled with tangled pipes and thick cables, moisture dripping off of every available surface. At the opposite end, a grated metal floor descended downward, forming another tight stairwell. Beyond it, darkness. We descended once more, and a sign above our head read, Sublevel 3. The walls were lined with old monitors, some still displaying static, drenched data. I walked over to the nearest one still displaying readable text, but the words on it made no sense to me. Temporal phenomena, reoccurrence threshold 94%, displacement stabilization incomplete. Please report anomalies. Containment field bypass requires triple synchronization. On-site subject 00 Delta. Pre-call Sov Canna. Status: stasis suspended. Maria startled me as she spoke behind me, also staring at the monitor. What the hell is this? I had no answer. Somewhere deeper, machinery groaned, rattling the floor beneath our feet. We need to get out of here, I said. Now. Maria shook her head. No. This place, temporal phenomena. That means time, right? Like we could go back and save Julian. She stepped forward, peering down the next set of stairs. I clenched my jaw and followed. We emerged into a small chamber, more than before, tiled in steel. At the far end, a locked door, thick and reinforced. A heavy, pressure-sealed vault. A red panel sat beside it, 3 large valves mounted to the wall. Maria frowned. This must be the triple bypass he mentioned, right? The intercom buzzed to life. Next to it, a microphone grill sat blinking with red light.
You're here. Good. The only way to open that door is to turn all 3 valves at the same time. It's a failsafe for keeping things out of here.
I exchanged a glance with Maria. There's only 2 of us. Silence. Then, static. A heavy, trembling breath.
Only 2?
Yeah, I said. Savannah went back for Mark. The voice shattered.
Oh my god. No. No, I told you explicitly not to split up. Get back upstairs. Go now.
Maria flinched, eyes wide. What? What's wrong?
She's not safe. None of you are safe. This can't be happening. Not again. Hurry.
I didn't wait. I grabbed Maria by the wrist and ran. Within 5 minutes, we were back at the door that sealed off sublevel maintenance from the junction we'd been waiting in. I slammed through the cracked bulkhead door in the main intersection, panting. Empty. Mark was gone. Savannah was gone. Maria skidded to a halted stop beside me, panic creeping into her voice. Where are they? They didn't leave us, right? As if in response, a pained wail echoed through the hallway to our right, a raw, guttural sound that echoed down the corridor. The hall leading back to the lander. Savannah. Maria and I bolted towards the sound. The corridor leading back to where we arrived stretched longer than I remembered. My own breathing was deafening in my ears. The wailing grew louder. We reached the end of the corridor, and in the dim light, Savannah sat hunched up ahead. She was on her knees, sobbing hysterically, clutching something on the ground. I felt my stomach drop. No. The body was hollowed and dry, a husked skeleton, its flesh dried and clinging to brittle bones. Its skull tilted unnaturally, its clothes unmistakable. Mark's clothes, Mark's backpack, Mark's boots. Maria screamed. Savannah collapsed against the wall, gasping between sobs. He was just here. He was just... Maria's hands trembled. No, he... I backed up, breath catching in my throat. my pulse roaring in my ears. I reached my hand out to brace myself against the wall, and rough marks scratched the palm of my hand. I looked at the wall next to me and stepped back in shock as dozens of tally marks sat scratched into the surrounding panels. Next to the tallies, scratched large into the wall, were the words, "I waited for days. You never came back." The scratches were rusted over, as if they'd been made decades ago. The silence was broken only by Savannah's uneven breathing and Maria's quiet sobs. The harsh glow of the maintenance corridor flickered intermittently, casting our solemn shadows dancing across the rust-stained walls. Savannah had stopped crying and now stared blankly into space, her face hollowed by grief and disbelief. Maria sat huddled nearby, her eyes red-rimmed and unfocused, mouthing a word over and over. Mark's body lay between us three, evidently unmoved for years. None of us dare speak. Words felt useless. All that remained was the cold, creeping dread. I checked my watch again, though I knew that by now, time had ceased to mean anything. I thought back to Mark, his panicked insistence that we only had 5 hours left, even though we had closer to 7. I shivered at the thought, the nauseating truth slowly crystallizing in my mind. The distortions, the inexplicable shifts. Mark's body, a dry husk, only minutes old. Time was splintering, fracturing around us, and we were caught in its collapse. The intercom ahead crackled to life, startling us all. The voice was strained, exhausted, desperate. There was something more than fear in it this time. There was sorrow. I could hear them crying.
Please come back. I know you're hurt. I know it seems hopeless, but I think there's still a chance. You can still help me. And maybe I can still help you.
Savannah's eyes snapped to the intercom, fury blazing behind her grief. Help you? Help you? Mark is dead. Julian's dead. You promised us answers and safety, and now they're gone. What do you want from us? Her voice cracked, breaking into choking sobs as she collapsed against the wall. The intercom sat silent for a long moment before the voice spoke again, almost a whisper.
I'm so sorry. I thought it would go differently this time. But please, I think things can still be made right. I need your help. Savannah, Maria, Elijah. We can make sure it goes right. We can make sure they never die.
Maria's head shot up, her eyes suddenly clear, desperate hope cutting through the tears. She rose to her feet, her legs shaking but decided. You said that last time. And now both Julian and Mark they're dead. That can't be undone. Static buzzed softly through the speaker, punctuated by the faint dripping somewhere far away.
You've seen it already,
the voice said softly.
How time here is broken. We're caught in something we don't understand. But if you can get to me, then I can help. There's a console in the room I'm in, and I think it controls the facility. I don't know how to use it, but together, we might be able to fix it. Together, there's still hope.
The speaker clicked off abruptly, leaving the three of us staring at the floor. Savannah looked hollow and defeated, Maria desperate. Both of them turned their heads my way, and I realized now the decision fell to me. I swallowed hard, forcing down the lump of dread lodged deep in my throat, my voice trembling. We don't have a choice, I said. We could leave now, but 28 hours in the lander could become 1,000 years, and we'd end up just like Mark. Or we move forward. Maybe we can, I don't know. Go back and save them? Maybe we have a chance, but only if we keep going. Savannah's face darkened. Defiance struggled against despair. After a long pause, she stood shakily, tears still streaming down her cheeks. I can't leave Mark here. Not like this. Maria moved closer, placing a gentle hand on Savannah's shoulder. She gave me a look, and I sighed. I stooped down to the ground, gently picking Mark up. His withered corpse was much lighter than I expected, dried and lacking all substance. I stood and silently made our way to the junction we'd now crossed several times before. Savannah trailed behind as I carried him down the unexplored corridor straight ahead, Mark as habitation. It didn't take long to find a suitable place to lay him to rest. A door to our right lay cracked open, and inside was what appeared to be a communal bedroom. One bed stood out among the rest, positioned neatly in the middle of the room, illuminated by a single light from above. The sheets were dusty and ragged, but neatly laid across the bed. Maria gently lifted the sheet, coughing as a cloud of ash and dust rose from beneath, tattered and rotten clothes filling the space under the sheets. Savannah gently removed Mark's boots, and I laid Mark down in the bed amidst the ash and tattered rags that matched his. Savannah went to place the boots in the corner of the room where dozens of identical pairs in varying states of decay already lied waiting. As I gently covered up his body with the sheets, I prayed that this was the last time he'd need to be laid to rest here. Together, in heavy silence, we retraced the steps we had made through the twisting labyrinth of the maintenance corridors. Rusted pipes and warped metal walls seemed tighter with every step we took toward the triple bypass chamber. Every sound echoed, our footfalls, our breathing, even our heartbeats reverberated around us, amplifying the tension that etched away at my nerves. Finally, as we descended the final set of stairs, the bypass chamber lay ahead of us, its heavy reinforced door waiting ahead. The room beyond and the voice trapped within waited in silence. The three valves, spaced evenly apart, stared back at us. "Okay," I said softly, forcing a shaky confidence I didn't feel. "Savannah, Maria and I made it down here before, and to get through, each of those needs to be turned simultaneously. It's the only way forward. I'm guessing the pressure will force the door open fairly quickly, so get out of the way as soon as you can. On 3, we turn." We moved into position, Maria on the left, Savannah on the right, me at center. My palms were slicked with cold sweat as I gripped the rusted wheel. 1. I heard a small sob from Savannah. 2. Maria closed her eyes, mouthing something silently, Julian's name. 3. The valves turned, metal grinding against rusted joints, groaning in protest until something within the walls clicked into place. A loud hiss echoed through the chamber as ancient locks disengaged. We backed away quickly, waiting for the door to swing open before us. The door cracked slightly for just a moment, and cold, damp air rushed out, filling the room with the smell of salt and decay. As it did, my stomach lurched, as a familiar blue shimmer shot through the air. As I blinked, I gasped in shock to find myself where I stood seconds prior, immediately in front of the door. As the door creaked and began to swing open rapidly, I leapt back just in time to see another flash pass through Savannah and Maria. Maria shimmered in the air for a second, similarly repeating where she had stood opening the valve. She didn't have enough time to react, and the door bust open. It slammed into her, knocking her off her feet and sending her flying before she landed with a dull thump on the steel floor. As I ran over to aid her, I turned back towards the door. I wish I hadn't. Savannah had similarly been reset in her position, her body where it had been when she turned the knob, occupying the same space. However, was the immense metal door that had swung out. Her outstretched arm twitched, poking through the solid metal like a tree emerging from the ground. Her face, half swallowed up by wrought steel, locked in a gasp. Her eye locked onto me before spiraling into a spasm, as a trickle of blood began to run out of her exposed nostril. The intercom crackled frantically, the voice barely audible through thickening static.
"The loop is destabilizing. You have to get in here, now. There's no more time."
I turned back Maria and attempted to rouse her from the floor. Her skin was cold to the touch, and as I felt for a pulse, I could discern a quick, unsteady heartbeat. "Maria, please wake up. We have to go. We have to go now. Please." No response. I looked towards the outstretched door. Inside was our last chance at fixing this. We couldn't wait a second longer. I pulled Maria into a fireman's carry and trudged towards the outstretched door. As we crossed through, it slammed behind us, and I heard 3 mechanical locks click shut. The room inside was almost as cavernous as the one we encountered in the research wing, its high ceilings swallowed by shadows. Countless monitors flickered around us, screens cycling through meaningless data and distorted video feeds. Thick bundles of cables snaked along the floor, disappearing into a pit almost as large as the one that had swallowed Julian up. Immensely large pumps filled the room, some pipes siphoning from the depths below, while others passed through the wall into whatever chamber lay ahead. Across the way was another heavy bulkhead emblazoned with the familiar white letters, W&H Temporal Anomaly Containment Observation Deck. A terminal beside it blinked urgently. I carried Maria across the hall without hesitation. I moved to the control panel, hands shaking as I attempted to access the observation deck from where the voice called out. A new warning flashed on the screen, bright red. Containment compromised. Observation deck flooding imminent. Manual override required. As I stared at the screen, the intercom hissed to life, frantic now.
Through the door. Hurry. I'm in here. Activate the purge and get inside. Please. It's almost too late.
I slammed my fist on the override. The chamber shook violently, alarms blaring as the pumps in the chamber shook violently and began furiously pumping water into the pit below. Beside me, Maria coughed suddenly, her body shaking against the wet floor as she began to seize. I rushed to her side, lifting her gently, panic rising in my throat as I found her pulse become more erratic, her breathing shallow. "No, Maria, come on. Stay with me," I shouted desperately, but she laid unresponsive in my arms. I turned back to the intercom, fury eclipsing my fear. Did you know that I'd only be able to make it this far? Has all this happened before?" The voice crackled back, broken and defeated.
I'm sorry. Please. Just open the door.
Rage overtook me, a boiling, uncontrollable anger. I won't let this happen again. I can't let you live. My hand hovered over the control, hesitating and trembling, then slammed onto the flood control override. The pumps paused for a moment, and I heard them roar back to life, pumping water back into the small room. Water roared violently behind the bulkhead door, overwhelming the speakers, drowning out the voices' anguished screams. I waited until the room fell quiet again. Then, with numb fingers, I reactivated the pumps. Slowly, the floodwaters receded behind the sealed door, leaving the chamber silent once more. The door hissed open, and with Maria limp in my arms, I stepped inside. She was cold in my arms, her head resting against my shoulder, her breath shallow and faint. The observation deck was quiet. Water pooled in shallow layers across the floor, sloshing beneath my boots as I stepped forward. The monitors inside still hummed with life, bolted to the floor and walls, seemingly waterproof. Banks of equipment lined the walls, lights blinking in slow, useless rhythms. A ring of thick conduit cables fed into a central pedestal, at the center of which stood a chair, its frame dripping with more of that strange blue fluid we've seen in the research wing. It oozed from the machinery like blood from a wound, seeping across the floor and spiraling through the water like octopus ink. Everything here smelled of salt, copper, and something sweetly rotten. And then I saw them. My breath caught in my throat, and I froze mid-step. Floating in the far corner of the room were 2 bodies, face down on the floor in a swirling pool of that blue ichor like insects in amber. The nearest one was wearing my clothes. I walked over, steps unsure, with shaky breath. I stared down at my own drowned face, eyes wide and blank. A tangle of dark hair waving in the shallow water like seaweed. Next to the other me, her hand barely touching mine, was another Maria. I staggered back, nearly slipping on the wet floor as I felt my body lurch to vomit, disgust surging through me. I looked down at the Maria I carried, real, injured but breathing, and then back at her lifeless corpse. This had already happened, and it was happening again, or hadn't happened yet. I didn't know anymore. None of it made sense. Things were folding in on each other like houses in a storm. Julian, Mark, Savannah, me, Maria. We'd all been here before. We were here now, and maybe always. I set Maria gently down into the chair, brushing her wet hair from her forehead. Her pulse was still weak, but steady. I glanced up at the camera in the corner of the room, blinking slowly through condensation. It was several hours before I could stand to look at our own bodies anymore. With effort, I hoisted them up and pushed them into the pit that lay at the center of the chamber behind me. It wouldn't matter, there would be another chance. That wouldn't be me. My hands trembled as I sat at the terminal beside the chair. The keyboard was stiff, half of the keys jammed with salt and rust. I wiped the screen with my sleeve, and a prompt appeared. Satellite uplink standby. Connection active. Online messaging on standby. I stared at the cursor blinking back at me and began to type this all out. I don't know who will find this, or when, or if anyone can. My name is Elijah. I came here with my old Urbex group, Mark and Savannah, my sister Maria, her boyfriend Julian. We were just supposed to explore a rig, our last big adventure. I watched them all die, one by one, some more than once. Time is broken here. It loops, collapses, but it always ends the same. I think I've reached the end now. The chamber is starting to flood again. The water's creeping up past my boots. Maria's still unconscious beside me. I think she's breathing. Maybe this time she'll wake up before it fills the room. I want to believe we'll get out. I want to believe this isn't the end. But if it is, if this message somehow gets out, if this upload reaches you, whoever you are, don't come looking. Don't follow the signal. The pumps are failing again. I am looking at the monitor beside me, flickering with the video feed of the facility. As I write this, something is catching my eye. One of the feeds is labeled Cam 01, surface platform. I can see the helicopter. I can see us unloading our bags. Tiny on the screen. Just dots on the helipad, but I'd know us anywhere. Mark, Julian, Savannah, Maria, and me. We just landed and we're laughing, alive. I'm watching myself confront my sister as she stares into the blackness of the sea. I know they won't be able to hear me until the morning, when they go to check the broadcast I'm sending into the control deck up top. But I know that I'm going to ask for their help. I'll warn them of everything that I think they'll understand, as little as that would be. I'll do my best to get them down as quickly as possible, to rescue Maria and I down here. Maybe this time they'll listen to me. Maybe this time it'll be different. What an ending. So it's just a loop. They're caught in this crazy loop. It's very interesting. It doesn't really explain the phenomenon that's going down there, or the big giant beast squid thing that was in the pit. But maybe it doesn't need explaining. But they're stuck in a loop, and that blue stuff might have something to do with it. It was like a research facility that things went wrong in, and these people got trapped in the loop, and they've been going back and back and back again. Amazing. Really, really good story writing. Appreciate you letting me read it. Appreciating you letting me put it all together. Like I said earlier, please go over to N-Cubed02, check out some of his other work. Leave him a comment. Let him know how you feel. I really, really dug this. I had a lot of people reaching out to me, telling me to finish it. So I jumped on it and tried to get it done as quick as I could. Please like, please subscribe. I am Migrant Masochist. Farewell.